Good evening, my dear Sawyer, Bryn, and Sai. I hope you're having a lovely rainy day, and I'm going to tell you a story about something that happened on a rainy day in one of my favorite stories. Now, I'm only going to read the first chapter, but if you love it, then maybe you'll pick it up and reread it if you've read it before, or read it again, or excuse me, or read it for the first time. Now, this story is a treasure, and you, I'm sure, have your own copy. It's The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Chapter 1. Lucy looks into a wardrobe. Once there were 4 children whose names were Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy. This story is about something that happened to them when they were sent away from London during the war because of the air raids. They were sent to live in the house of an old professor who lived in the heart of the country, 10 miles from the nearest railway station and 2 miles from the nearest post office. He had no wife, and he lived in a very large house with a housekeeper called Mrs. Macready and 3 servants. Their names were Ivy, Margaret, and Betty, but they do not come into the story very much. He himself was an old man with a shaggy white hair, which grew most of all over his face, as well as on his head, and they liked him almost at once. But on the first evening, when he came out to meet them at the front door, he was so odd-looking that Lucy, who was the youngest, was a little bit afraid of him, and Edmund, who was the next youngest, wanted to laugh, and he had to keep on pretending he was blowing his nose to hide it. As soon as they had said good night to the professor and had gone upstairs on the first night, the boys came into the girls' room and they all talked it over. "We've fallen on our feet, and no mistake," said Peter. "This is going to be perfectly splendid. That old chap will let us do anything we like." "I think he's an old dear," said Susan. "Oh, come off it," said Edmund, who was tired and pretending not to be tired, which always made him bad-tempered. "Don't go on talking like that." "Like what?" said Susan. "And anyway, it's time you went to bed." Trying to talk like mother," said Edmund. "And who are you to say when I'm going to bed? Go to bed yourself." "Hadn't we all better go to bed?" said Lucy. "There's sure to be a row if we're heard talking here." "No, there won't," said Peter. "I tell you, this is the sort of house where no one's going to mind what we do. Anyway, they won't hear us. It's about 10 minutes walk from here down to that dining room, and any amount of stairs and passages in between." "What's that noise?" said Lucy suddenly. It was a far larger house than she had ever seen before, and the thought of those long passages and rows of doors leading to empty rooms was beginning to make her feel a little creepy. "Oh, it's only a little bird, silly," said Edmund. "It's an owl," said Peter. This is going to be a wonderful place for birds. I shall go to bed now. I say, let's go and explore tomorrow. You might find anything in a place like this. Did you see mountains as we came along? Those woods? There might be eagles, there might be stags, there might be hogs." "Badgers," said Lucy. "Foxes," said Edmund. "Rabbits," said Susan. But when the next morning came, there was a steady rain falling, so thick that when you looked out the window, you could see neither the mountain nor the woods nor even the stream in the garden. "Of course it would be raining," said Edmund. They had just finished their breakfast with the professor, And they were upstairs in the room, and he set apart for them a long, low room with 2 windows looking out in one direction and 2 in another. "Oh, do stop grumbling, Ed," said Susan. 10 to 1, it'll clear up in an hour or so. And in the meantime, we're pretty well off. There's a wireless and lots of books. "Not for me," said Peter. "I'm going to explore the house." Everyone agreed to this. Oh dear, my glasses are giving me all kinds of trouble. How is that? Better. Everyone agreed to this, and that's how the adventures began. It was the sort of house that you never seem to come to the end of, and it was full of unexpected places. The first few doors they tried to lead only led only to spare bedrooms, as everyone had expected they would. But soon they came to a very long room full of pictures, and there they found a suit of armor, and after that a room all hung with green, with a harp in one corner, and then came 3 steps down and 5 steps up, and the kind of little upstairs hall, and a door that leads out to a balcony, and then a whole section of rooms that led to each other and were lined with books, most of them very old books, and some even bigger than the Bibles found in church. Oh. And shortly after that, they looked into a room that was quite empty except for one big wardrobe, the sort that has a looking glass in the door. There was nothing in the room all except a dead blue bottle on the windowsill. "Nothing there," said Peter, and they all trooped again, all except Lucy. She stayed behind because she thought it would be worthwhile trying the door of the wardrobe, even though she felt almost sure that it would be locked. To her surprise, it opened quite easily, and 2 mothballs dropped out. Looking inside, she saw several coats hanging up, mostly long fur coats. There was nothing Lucy liked so much as the smell and feel of fur. Now take a look at the wardrobe. Now, you may know that just a few blocks from where you learn music, and you may have seen it already, is the Wade Center, where the original wardrobe that inspired this story is. And one day, by the grace of God, we shall be able to take a gander and look at the actual wardrobe. That was a nice picture, wasn't it? Let's see. Where was I? Oh, goodness. Oh, yes. She immediately stepped into the wardrobe and got in among the coats and rubbed her face against them, leaving the door open, of course, because she knew that it was very foolish to shut oneself in any wardrobe. Soon she went further and found out there was a second row of coats hanging behind the first one. It was almost quite dark in there, and she kept her arms stretched out in front of her so as not to bump her face to the back of the wardrobe. She took a step further in, and 2 or 3 steps, always expecting to feel woodwork against the tip of her fingers, but she could not feel it. This is going to be simply an enormous wardrobe, so thought Lucy, going further in and pushing the soft folds of the coats aside to make room for herself. Then she noticed that there was something crunching under her feet. "Oh, I wonder if that's more mothballs," she thought, stooping down to feel it with her hand. But instead of feeling the hard, smooth floor of the wardrobe, she felt something soft and powdery and extremely cold. "Oh, this is very queer," she said. "How strange," and she went on a step or 2 further. Next moment, she found out that what was rubbing against her face and her hands was no longer soft fur, but something hard and rough and even prickly. "Why, it's like the branches of trees," she exclaimed. And when she saw that there was a light ahead of her, not a few inches away, where the back of the wardrobe ought to have been, but a long way off, something cold and soft was falling on her. A moment later, she found herself standing in the middle of a wood at the night time, with snow under her feet and snowflakes falling through the air. Lucy felt a little frightened, but she felt inquisitive and excited as well. She looked back over her shoulder, and there, between the dark tree trunks, she could still see the open doorway of the wardrobe, and even catch a glimpse of the empty room from which she had set out. She, of course, left the door open, for she knew that it was a very silly thing indeed to shut oneself in a wardrobe. It seemed to still be daylight there. I can always still go back if things go wrong, thought Lucy, and she began to walk forward, crunch, crunch over the snow, and through the wood toward the other light. In about 10 minutes, she reached it, and she found it was a lamppost. As she stood looking at it, wondering why there was a lamppost in the middle of the wood, and wondering what to do next, she heard a pitter-patter of feet coming toward her, and that a very strange person soon after came out from among the trees into the light of the lamppost. Here's that lamppost she keeps mentioning. Who do you think it is? Now, I know some of you already read this book, probably, but he was only a little taller than herself, and he carried over his head an umbrella, white with snow. From the waist upward, he was like a man, but his legs were shaped like a goat's. The hair on them was glossy black, and instead of feet, he had goat's hoofs. He also had a tail. Oh boy, this is an interesting character. But Lucy did not notice this at first, because it was neatly caught up over the arm that had the umbrella so as to keep it from trailing in the snow. He had a red woolen muffler around his neck, and his skin was rather reddish too. He had a strange but pleasant little face, with a short pointed beard and curly hair. Out of the hair there stuck 2 horns, one on each side of his forehead. One of his hands, as I have said, held the umbrella, and in the other arm he carried several brown paper parcels. But with the parcels and with the snow, it just looked like he had just been doing some Christmas shopping. He was a fawn, and when he saw Lucy, he gave such a start of surprise, he dropped all of his parcels or packages. "Goodness gracious me!" exclaimed the fawn. And that, dear ones, is where chapter 1 ends. What a lovely, lovely story this is, and I hope that you pick it up and enjoy reading or rereading it one more time during this quarantine. With love, your Auntie Mai. And of course, if you would like me to keep reading, I'd be happy to keep reading for you. But I thought perhaps you'd be a bit bored and you wouldn't want to hear it again and again and again if you'd already read it and reread it. But you let me know and I'll be happy to oblige. My love and gratitude to each one of you. Sawyer, Bryn, and Sai. Love you.